The morning air was cold when 17-year-old Daniel stepped off the bus in front of the Vienna Music Conservatory. He had been on that bus for 3 hours, coming from the small town where he lived with his father and younger sister. His hands were shaking, but not from the cold. He looked up at the building. It was huge, with tall columns and windows that seemed to touch the sky. Students walked past him carrying expensive instrument cases, talking and laughing. Their clothes looked new. Their shoes were polished. Daniel looked down at his own jacket. It was clean, but the elbows were worn thin. His shoes had been his father's once. Inside the lobby, everything was marble and gold. A grand chandelier hung from the ceiling, throwing light everywhere. Daniel had never seen anything like it. He clutched his folder of sheet music tighter. The papers inside were held together with tape, because the folder's clasp had broken months ago. "Auditions are on the 3rd floor," a woman at the desk said without looking up. "You're late." "I'm sorry," Daniel said quietly. The bus was delayed. She pointed toward a staircase. Daniel climbed the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. He had practiced for this day for 2 years. Every evening after school, he would stay behind in the empty music room, playing the old piano that sat in the corner. The janitor, Mr. Hoffman, would let him stay until 8 o'clock. Sometimes Daniel would miss dinner, but he didn't care. The piano was the only place where everything made sense. When he reached the audition room, he stopped outside the door. He could hear a piano playing inside. The music was perfect, every note exactly where it should be. Then it stopped and he heard clapping. "Excellent work, Christoph," a deep voice said. "We'll be in touch." The door opened and a tall boy with blonde hair walked out. He had a confident smile. He glanced at Daniel and his smile grew wider, like he had already won. "Next," the same deep voice called from inside. Daniel walked in. The room was large, with dark wooden panels on the walls and a beautiful grand piano in the center. Behind a long table sat 5 people. 4 of them were sorting through papers, but the man in the middle was staring right at Daniel. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair combed back from his forehead. His suit looked expensive. His eyes were sharp and cold. This was Director Wilhelm Schneider, the head of the conservatory. Daniel had read about him. He had trained some of the greatest pianists in Europe. He was also known for being harsh. Some people said he enjoyed crushing dreams. "Name?" Schneider asked. "Daniel Chen, sir." "Chinese?" "My mother was from Beijing. My father is Austrian." "And where did you study?" "I go to Riverside Secondary School, sir." "In the valley." One of the other judges whispered something. Schneider smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Riverside Secondary. I see, and do they have a music program there?" "Not exactly, sir. But there's a piano in the music room. I practiced there after school." "After school? Self-taught then?" "I had some lessons when I was younger, sir. Before my mother passed away. After that, I taught myself." Schneider leaned back in his chair. He looked at the other judges, then back at Daniel. "And you think that qualifies you to audition for the Vienna Conservatory? Do you have any idea how many applications we receive?" "Hundreds. From students who have trained since they were 5 years old. Students who have performed at concert halls. Students with private tutors and perfect technique." Daniel felt his face grow hot. "I know, sir. But I work hard. I practice every day." "Hard work?" Schneider laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what separates a good pianist from a great one? Breeding. Talent is inherited. It's in the blood. No amount of practice can replace that." The room felt smaller suddenly. Daniel wanted to leave, to run back to the bus and forget this had ever happened. But then he thought of his mother. She used to play piano every evening when he was small. She would close her eyes and smile, and the music would fill their tiny apartment. After she got sick, she made him promise something. "Promise me you'll keep playing," she had said, her voice weak. "Promise me you won't give up on music." He had promised. "I'd like to audition anyway, sir," Daniel said. His voice was steady now. "If that's allowed." Schneider waved his hand dismissively. "Fine, play your piece. Let's see what self-teaching produces." Daniel walked to the piano. His legs felt weak. He set his folder down on the music stand, and that's when the clasp finally gave way completely. Papers scattered across the floor. He heard someone snicker. He bent down and gathered the sheets, his face burning. When he stood up, he looked at Schneider. The director was smiling that cold smile again. "I'd like to play something different, sir," Daniel said. Not the required piece, the smile vanished. "Excuse me? I wrote something. A composition. I'd like to play that instead." The room went completely silent. One of the judges cleared her throat nervously. Sneered slowly stood up from his chair. He was tall, intimidating. "You want to play your own composition? At an audition? Breaking every rule we have?" "It's dedicated to my mother, sir. I've been working on it for 2 years." Sneered stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a loud, mocking laugh that echoed off the wooden panels. "This is remarkable," he said to the other judges. "Truly remarkable. A boy with no formal training from some rural school wants to play his own composition at the Vienna Conservatory." He turned back to Daniel. "Tell me, boy, do you have any idea how arrogant that sounds?" "I'm not trying to be arrogant, sir. I just want you to hear what I can do. What you can do." Sneered walked closer to the piano. "Let me tell you something. I have been training musicians for 40 years. I have heard every excuse, every sob story, every desperate attempt to impress me. And do you know what I see when I look at you? I see a boy who is wasting my time." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "Don't react," he told himself. "Don't give him the satisfaction." "However," Sneered continued, "I am feeling generous today. I'll make you a deal. You play your little composition, and if it's actually good, if you can play anything worth listening to." He paused and looked at the other judges with that mocking smile. "I'll kneel right here on this floor, right in front of everyone." The other judges shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them, an older woman, looked like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. "But when you fail," Sneered said, leaning closer, "you leave this building and never come back. You forget about music school. You accept that some dreams are not meant for people like you. Do we have an agreement?" Daniel looked at the piano. His mother's face flashed in his mind. Her smile, her hands on the keys, her last words to him. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "We have an agreement." He sat down at the piano bench. His heart was racing so fast he thought everyone could hear it. He placed his hands on the keys. They were cold and smooth. Behind him, Sneered returned to his seat, already looking bored. Daniel closed his eyes and began to play. The first notes came out soft, almost like a whisper. Daniel's fingers touched the keys gently, carefully, as if he was afraid to wake someone sleeping. The melody was simple at first. Just a few notes, repeated slowly. It sounded like a lullaby. In the back of the room, Sneered crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair. His face showed exactly what he was thinking. This was going to be a waste of time. He had heard 1,000 auditions. This would be no different. But then something changed. The melody began to grow. Daniel's left hand joined in, adding deeper notes that rumbled underneath like distant thunder. The lullaby was still there, but now there was something else. Something darker. Something that spoke of loss. The older woman judge sat up straighter in her chair. Her pen had stopped moving across her paper. Daniel's hands began to move faster. The music shifted like weather changing. Now it wasn't soft anymore. It was urgent, pressing, like someone running through rain. His fingers flew across the keys, hitting notes so quickly they blurred together into a stream of sound. But it wasn't messy. Every note belonged exactly where it was. One of the younger judges leaned forward, his mouth slightly open. He had never heard anything quite like this before. It wasn't just classical music. There was something else woven into it. Jazz chords that shouldn't work but somehow did. And underneath it all, there was a melody that sounded ancient, like a folk song passed down through generations. This was Daniel's mother's music. The songs she used to hum while cooking dinner, the tunes she would play late at night when she couldn't sleep. He had taken all of those memories and woven them together with everything he had learned from listening to the great composers, Mozart and Chopin and Rachmaninoff, yes, but also the jazz musicians his mother loved. Bill Evans, Thelonious Monk, Keith Jarrett. The music built higher and higher. Daniel's whole body moved with the piano now. His shoulders swayed. His head tilted back. He wasn't thinking about Sneered anymore. He wasn't thinking about the audition or the other judges or whether he would get accepted. He was somewhere else entirely. He was back in their old apartment. His mother was healthy again, sitting beside him on the bench. Her hands covered his, guiding his fingers across the keys. "Feel it, Daniel," she would say. "Don't just play the notes. Feel what they mean." A single tear rolled down Daniel's cheek, but he didn't stop playing. In the back of the room, Sneeder's arms slowly uncrossed. His expression had changed. The smug confidence was gone. His eyes were fixed on the boy at the piano. watching every movement, listening to every note. His mouth had fallen open slightly. The music suddenly became quiet again. Daniel's hands moved delicately now, picking out a melody that was almost heartbreaking in its simplicity. It was the song his mother had sung to him when he was small. When he couldn't sleep, when he was afraid, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star," but transformed into something that carried years of longing and love and grief. The female judge pressed her hand against her chest. Her eyes were watering. Then the storm returned. Daniel's hands crashed down on the keys with force that made everyone in the room jump. The music exploded into life. It was angry now, furious at death and loss and unfairness. His fingers hammered out chords that shook the air. This was the night his mother died. This was him, 13 years old, standing in a hospital hallway, unable to cry because the pain was too big for tears. The youngest judge had tears streaming down his face now. He wasn't even trying to hide them, but Daniel wasn't done. The anger melted into something else: acceptance, hope. His hands softened again and the melody returned, but different this time, stronger, more certain. This was him learning to live without her. This was him finding the piano in the school music room. This was Mr. Hoffman, the janitor, letting him stay late. This was 2 years of practice, of slowly putting himself back together, note by note. Outside the audition room, students had stopped walking. They stood in the hallway, silent, listening to the music that poured through the closed door. Some had pressed their ears against the wood. Others just stood there frozen, not understanding what they were hearing but knowing it was something special. Inside, Sneered had gone completely still. His face had lost all its color. He stared at Daniel like he was seeing a ghost. The music began to wind down now. Daniel's hands slowed. The melody became softer, gentler. It was the lullaby again, but changed by everything that had come before. It was sadder now, but also wiser. It knew about pain, but it also knew that pain doesn't last forever. The final notes came like a sunset. Each one held for a long moment before fading away. Daniel's foot pressed the sustain pedal, letting the sound ring out, filling every corner of the room. The last note lingered in the air for what felt like forever. Then silence. Complete, total silence. Daniel sat at the piano, his hands still resting on the keys. His chest was heaving. Tears ran freely down his face now, dripping onto his worn jacket. He had poured everything into that performance. Everything he was, everything he had lost, everything he hoped to become. The silence stretched on. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. Then slowly the female judge began to clap. Her hands came together once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed in the quiet room. The judge beside her joined in. Then another. Within seconds, all the judges except Sneered were applauding. Not politely, the way they had for the other students. This was real. Their hands struck together hard and fast. The door burst open. Students flooded in, unable to contain themselves. They had heard everything through the walls. A few of the professors had come too, drawn by the music. They all started clapping. The sound filled the room like thunder. Daniel turned around on the bench, confused. He wasn't sure what was happening. He had been so lost in the music that the real world felt strange now, too bright and too loud. His eyes found Sneered. The director was still sitting in his chair. He hadn't moved. He hadn't clapped. He just sat there staring at Daniel with an expression that was impossible to read. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had turned white. The applause continued. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" from the back of the room. A girl was crying. An older professor was shaking his head in disbelief, smiling wide. But Daniel only watched Sneered. The director's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. He tried again. "Everyone out," he said quietly. Nobody heard him over the applause. "Everyone out!" Sneered roared, standing up so fast his chair fell backward with a crash. The room went silent again. Students looked at each other nervously. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to file out of the room. The other judges hesitated, but Sneered waved them away too. "Leave us," he said. His voice was shaking. One by one, they left. The female judge touched Daniel's shoulder as she passed, a small gesture of encouragement. Then she was gone too, and the door closed. Daniel and Sneered stood alone in the large room. The piano sat between them like a bridge or a barrier, depending on how you looked at it. Schneider walked toward the piano. Each step echoed on the wooden floor. His face was hard to read. Anger, shame, something else? He stopped a few feet from Daniel. The boy stood up from the bench, his legs unsteady. They faced each other in the afternoon light that streamed through the tall windows. "You..." Schneider started, then stopped. He closed his eyes. His jaw clenched. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet. Daniel held his breath. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. Schneider took one more step forward. Then slowly, with a heaviness that seemed to carry the weight of 40 years, he began to lower himself down. His knees bent. His expensive suit touched the dusty floor. Wilhelm Schneider, director of the Vienna Conservatory, the man who had trained some of Europe's finest musicians, the man who had crushed hundreds of dreams without a second thought, knelt before a 17-year-old boy in a worn jacket. The afternoon sun caught the tears on his cheeks. Daniel stared down at the man kneeling before him. His mind couldn't quite process what he was seeing. This was Director Schneider, the same man who had mocked him 20 minutes ago, the same man who had laughed at his dreams, and now he was on his knees on the dusty floor, tears running down his face. "Sir," Daniel said quietly. "You don't have to be quiet," Schneider said, his voice cracking. "Please, just let me do this." The director stayed down for a long moment. His head was bowed. His shoulders shook slightly. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "I have been teaching music for 42 years, Schneider said. 42 years. Do you know how many students I've taught? Thousands. Some of them are famous now. They play in concert halls around the world. They've won awards, made recordings, and I always took credit for their success. I told myself I made them great." He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "But just now, listening to you play, I realized something. I haven't been teaching music at all. I've been teaching technique. Finger placement, timing, theory, all the technical parts. But music? Real music? The kind that makes people cry? The kind that changes something inside you? I've been killing that, crushing it out of my students for 42 years. Daniel didn't know what to say. He had expected anger or dismissal, maybe grudging acceptance at best. Not this. Schneider slowly got to his feet. His knees cracked. He brushed the dust off his expensive suit pants, but he didn't seem to care that they were dirty now. "Your mother," he said. "When did she pass?" 2 years ago, cancer." Schneider nodded slowly. "And that piece? That was for her?" "Yes, sir. You loved her very much." It wasn't a question, but Daniel answered anyway. "She was everything to me. She's the reason I play." Schneider walked to the window and looked out at the courtyard below. Students were gathered in small groups, talking excitedly. Word had already spread about what happened in the audition room. "My mother played piano too," Schneider said softly. "When I was a boy growing up in Hamburg, we were poor, very poor. But she had this old upright piano. Half the keys stuck. It was terribly out of tune, but she played it every day. She played with such joy, such freedom." He turned back to face Daniel. "When I got accepted to music school, my teachers trained that freedom out of me. They said I was too emotional, too wild, not disciplined enough, so I learned to be perfect. Every note exactly right, every phrase exactly as the composer intended, and I became successful. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started playing in the first place." Daniel listened quietly. This felt important somehow, like watching something break and rebuild itself at the same time. "And then I became a teacher," Schneider continued, "and I did to my students exactly what was done to me. I made them perfect, technical, cold. I thought I was helping them, preparing them for the real world of classical music. But I was just passing on my own damage." He walked back to the piano and ran his hand along its polished surface. "When you played today, you reminded me what I've lost, what I've been taking from others. That piece you wrote, it was technically imperfect. There were moments where the timing was off, places where a more trained pianist would have done things differently. But none of that mattered, because it was true. It was honest. It was real." "Thank you, sir," Daniel said. He still felt like he was in a dream. "Don't thank me," Schneider said sharply. Then his voice softened. "I'm the one who should be thanking you. You've given me a gift today, though I don't deserve it. You've shown me what I've become." He picked up his folder from the table and shuffled through some papers. He pulled out a form and signed it quickly. "You're accepted," he said, handing the paper to Daniel. Full scholarship. Room and board included. Daniel took the paper with shaking hands. He looked down at Schneider's signature in black ink. This was real. This was actually happening, but I have a condition, Schneider said. Daniel's heart sank a little. Of course there was a condition. I want you to teach me, Schneider said. What? I want you to teach me how to play like that. How to feel music again. How to stop being so afraid of emotion that I strangle it before it can breathe. Sir, I don't think I can teach you anything. You're one of the greatest musicians in Europe. I'm one of the greatest technicians in Europe, Schneider corrected. There's a difference. And if I'm going to keep teaching, if I'm going to do right by my students, I need to remember that difference. Daniel didn't know what to say. The idea of teaching Director Schneider anything seemed impossible. Ridiculous even. Think about it, Schneider said. For now, go home, rest, tell your father the good news. School starts in 3 weeks. We'll talk more then. Daniel nodded. He folded the acceptance paper carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. He started toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Sir, why did you really kneel? I mean, beyond keeping your word. Schneider smiled sadly. Because in that moment after hearing you play, I realized that I was in the presence of something greater than myself. Not you necessarily, but what you carried with you. Your love for your mother, your honesty, your courage to be vulnerable. Those are things I've spent my whole life running from. And they're the things that make real music possible. He paused, then added quietly, I knelt because for the first time in decades I felt small, and it was a relief. The next few days were strange for Daniel. Word had spread through the entire music community in Vienna. Someone had recorded the applause on their phone, and though the music itself wasn't captured, the reaction was. It went viral. People were calling it the audition of the decade. Daniel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Music journalists wanted interviews. Other conservatories suddenly wanted to offer him scholarships too. A recording company contacted his father about a possible contract, but Daniel's father, Chen Wei, was cautious. He had been through too much disappointment in his life to trust sudden good fortune. His wife's death had broken something in him. He had struggled with drinking, with depression, with keeping food on the table. The idea that his son was now wanted by the most prestigious music school in Austria seemed too good to be true. Be careful, his father warned him one evening. They sat in their small kitchen eating rice and vegetables. These people, they want something from you now. But what happens when you can't give it to them anymore? Dad, I'm just going to study. Learn more. Get better. And then what? You become like that director? Rich and mean? Daniel thought about Schneider kneeling on the floor, about the tears on his face. No, Daniel said. I don't think I'll become like that. His younger sister, Lynn, came home from school excited. She was 12, bright and curious. Everyone at school is talking about you, she said. They're saying you made a famous teacher cry. Is that true? Sort of, Daniel admitted. Good, Lynn said firmly. He sounds like he was mean. Mean people should cry sometimes. It's good for them. Their father smiled for the first time in days. Your sister, the philosopher. That night, Daniel lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened. The audition felt like it had taken place in another lifetime. Had it really been only 3 days? He thought about Schneider's request. To teach him, to help him feel music again. It seemed impossible. But then again, a week ago, getting into the Vienna Conservatory seemed impossible too. His phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. This is Wilhelm Schneider. I wanted you to know something. Today I apologize to my advanced students for the way I've been teaching them. Some of them cried. Some walked out. But a few understood. We're going to try something different from now on. You did this. Thank you. Daniel read the message 3 times. Then he typed back, I'll help you. If I can. The response came immediately. Good, we start next week? And Daniel, bring that piece you wrote. I want to learn to play it. If you'll let me. Daniel smiled in the darkness of his room. Outside the night was quiet. Tomorrow he would go back to school, to his normal life for a few more weeks. But everything had changed. The door to his future had opened, and there was no closing it now. He just had to be brave enough to walk through. 3 weeks later, Daniel walked through the gates of the Vienna Conservatory as a student. He carried 2 suitcases, both old and battered. One held his clothes. The other held his sheet music and a framed photo of his mother. The dormitory room was small but clean. He had a roommate, A boy named Klaus from Germany who played violin. Klaus barely looked up from his phone when Daniel entered. "You're the piano guy," Klaus said. "Not a question. Everyone's talking about you." "I'm just here to learn," Daniel said quietly. "Right." Klaus went back to his phone. The first week was harder than Daniel expected. He thought getting accepted was the difficult part. He was wrong. The classes were intense. Music theory at 7 in the morning. Piano technique at 9. Composition at 11. History of classical music after lunch. Chamber music practice in the evening. And the other students. Some were friendly enough, curious about the boy who made director Schneider kneel, but others looked at him with cold eyes. They had trained their whole lives for this. They came from musical families. Their parents were conductors, concert pianists, opera singers. They had studied with private tutors since they were 5 years old. Daniel was an outsider. The boy from nowhere who got lucky once. In piano technique class, Professor Adler made him play scales for an hour while the other students watched. Afterward, she called out everything he did wrong. His posture, his hand position, the way his fingers curved, or didn't curve enough. "You have raw talent," she said in front of everyone, "but talent without discipline is like a wild horse. Useless until it's broken." Some students smirked. Daniel felt his face burn, but the worst part was the whispers. He would walk into the practice rooms and conversations would stop. He'd sit in the cafeteria and people at nearby tables would lean close to each other, talking quietly while glancing his way. One afternoon, he found a note slipped under his dorm room door. "You don't belong here. Go back to your little town." It wasn't signed. Daniel crumpled the note and threw it away, but it bothered him more than he wanted to admit. By Friday of that first week, he was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. He sat alone in a practice room staring at the piano, not sure if he even wanted to play anymore. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," Daniel said. Director Schneider entered. He looked different somehow. Less rigid. His tie was loose. His sleeves were rolled up. "How is your first week going?" Schneider asked. Daniel considered lying, saying everything was fine. But something in Schneider's expression made him tell the truth. "It's hard," Daniel admitted. "I'm behind everyone else. They've all been training forever. And some of them, they don't want me here." Schneider nodded. He pulled up a chair and sat down, which surprised Daniel. The great director, sitting like a regular person. "After you left that day, after your audition, I went home and couldn't sleep," Schneider said. "I kept thinking about all the students I'd rejected over the years. Talented students. Students with something real to say. I rejected them because they didn't fit the mold, because they were rough around the edges, because they reminded me too much of who I used to be." He paused, looking at his hands. "I made some calls, tracked down a few of them. One is working in a factory now. Another is a waiter. One woman is a nurse. They all gave up on music because I told them they weren't good enough. And the thing is, technically they weren't. But that's not what matters, is it?" "I don't know," Daniel said honestly. "Right now it feels like technique is all that matters. I can't keep up in class. Professor Adler thinks I'm hopeless." "Professor Adler is an excellent teacher of technique," Schneider said. "But she's forgotten something too. We all have." He stood up and walked to the piano. "Play something for me, anything, not from your classes. Something you want to play." Daniel hesitated, then sat at the bench. He started playing a melody that had been in his head all week. It was sad and uncertain, like how he felt. His fingers found the notes without thinking. The music expressed what he couldn't say out loud. When he finished, Schneider was smiling. Really smiling, not the cold smile from before. "That," Schneider said, "is why you're here. Not because of your technique. Because of that. Never lose it, Daniel. No matter what anyone says. No matter how much they try to make you fit their idea of what a pianist should be." Over the next few months, things slowly got better. Daniel worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life. He practiced technique until his fingers ached. He studied theory until his head hurt. But he also kept playing his own music, writing new pieces, staying true to what Schneider had said. And Schneider kept his word too. Once a week they met in a private practice room. But it wasn't a normal lesson. Schneider would play and Daniel would listen. The director was trying to find his way back to something he'd lost. At first, Schneider played like he always had. Perfect, technical, empty. "Stop thinking," Daniel would say. "Just feel it." "I don't know how anymore," Schneider admitted one day. He sounded lost. Close your eyes, Daniel suggested. Think about your mother. The one who played the old piano. What did her playing sound like? Schneider closed his eyes. His hands hovered over the keys. Then slowly he began to play. It was clumsy at first. He hit wrong notes. His timing was off. But there was something there. Something real. When he finished, his hands were shaking. That was terrible, he said. Technically, that was a disaster. That was beautiful, Daniel said. That was honest. Schneider looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. Not mockingly, with genuine joy. My mother would have liked you, he said. Word spread about Schneider's transformation. Some of the older professors were shocked. The great Wilhelm Schneider making mistakes, playing with emotion. Some thought he was having a breakdown. But his students noticed something else. He was different in class now. He still taught technique, but he also talked about meaning, about purpose, about why they played. Music isn't about being perfect, he told his advanced class one day. It's about being human. And humans are messy, emotional, complicated. Your playing should reflect that. Some students didn't understand. They had spent years chasing perfection. This new philosophy confused them. A few even transferred to other teachers. But others started to blossom. They played with more freedom, more risk, more heart. Daniel watched all of this with amazement. He had started something just by being himself. By playing honestly, his relationship with the other students slowly improved too. Some remained cold, but others started talking to him, asking him questions. A girl named Petra, who played cello, asked if he'd collaborate with her on a piece. A shy pianist named Joseph asked Daniel to listen to his composition and give feedback. Klaus, his roommate, finally put down his phone one evening. I listened to a recording of your audition, Klaus said. Someone bootlegged it. It's all over the internet now. I know, Daniel said. He'd been trying to ignore that. It's really good, Klaus continued. Like really good. I get it now. Why everyone was talking about you. Thanks, Daniel said, surprised. Want to get dinner? Klaus asked. There's a good cheap place near campus. My treat. It was a small thing, an invitation to dinner. But it meant more than Klaus knew. Not everything was perfect. Daniel still struggled in some classes. Professor Adler remained unimpressed with his technique, though she admitted he was improving. His father called once a week, worried about money, asking if Daniel was sure about this path, but Daniel was sure. More sure than he'd been about anything. One evening, 6 months after starting at the conservatory, Schneider called him to his office. I have something to tell you, Schneider said. He looked nervous. The conservatory is putting on a spring concert, a showcase for students and faculty. I've been asked to perform. That's great, Daniel said. And I want to play your piece, the one you wrote for your mother. If you'll let me. Daniel felt emotion rise in his throat. His piece, the one that had changed everything. In the hands of Wilhelm Schneider. You'd do that? Daniel asked. I'd be honored, Schneider said. But only if you play it with me, a duet. We'll arrange it for 4 hands. Master and student. Teacher and teacher. What do you say? Daniel thought about his mother. About that day in the audition room. About everything that had happened since. About how one moment of courage had changed not just his life but others' lives too. Yes, he said. Let's do it, Schneider smiled. And for the first time since Daniel had known him, it reached his eyes. The night of the spring concert arrived with unexpected rain. Daniel stood backstage, watching water streak down the tall windows of the concert hall. His hands were sweating. He wiped them on his pants for the 100th time. The hall was packed. Over 800 people had come. Students, faculty, parents, music critics from newspapers across Europe. Everyone wanted to see Wilhelm Schneider perform again. He hadn't played publicly in over 15 years. Daniel's father sat in the 3rd row wearing the suit Daniel had bought him for Christmas. Beside him was Lynn wearing her best dress. She kept looking around at everything with wide eyes. This was the fanciest place she'd ever been. Next to them sat Mr. Hoffman, the janitor from Daniel's old school. The man who had let him practice all those evenings. Daniel had sent him a personal invitation. Mr. Hoffman had tears in his eyes before the concert even started. Backstage, Schneider paced back and forth. He was nervous, more nervous than Daniel had ever seen him. What if I mess up? Schneider asked. What if I hit wrong notes? What if I forget the arrangement? Then you forget, Daniel said. It's okay. We'll figure it out. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who spent 40 years telling students that mistakes are unacceptable. Maybe it's time to show them something different, Daniel suggested. Sneered stopped pacing. He looked at Daniel and took a deep breath. You're right. You're absolutely right. He smiled nervously. When did you become the wise one? I learned from the best, Daniel said. Before they went on, several other performances took place. A string quartet played Mozart. A soprano sang an aria from an Italian opera. A young pianist performed Chopin. Each performance was met with polite applause. Then it was their turn. The stage manager gave them the signal. Daniel and Sneered walked onto the stage together. The applause was immediate and loud. Sneered waved awkwardly, not used to being on this side of a performance anymore. They sat at the grand piano side by side. Sneered on the left, Daniel on the right. The arrangement they had created put them close together, their shoulders almost touching. The hall went quiet. That special kind of quiet that only happens before music begins. Sneered looked at Daniel. Daniel nodded. Together they placed their hands on the keys. The piece began the same way it had during Daniel's audition. Soft, gentle, like a whisper. But now there were two voices instead of one. Sneered played the bass notes deep and steady like a heartbeat. Daniel carried the melody above. As the music grew, something magical happened. Their playing blended together so completely you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Sneered brought his years of technical mastery. Daniel brought his raw emotion. Together, they created something neither could have done alone. In the third row, Daniel's father gripped the armrests of his seat. He had never understood his son's obsession with music. After his wife died, he had wanted Daniel to focus on practical things. A steady job, security. But listening to this, watching his son on stage with one of Europe's greatest musicians, he finally understood. This was Daniel's language. This was how he spoke to the world. Lynn leaned forward in her seat, her mouth open. She had heard her brother practice thousands of times. But this was different. This was complete. Mr. Hoffman wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. He thought about all those evenings letting a young boy stay late in the music room. He had just been doing a kindness. He had no idea it would lead to this. The music reached the angry section, where Daniel had poured out his grief during the audition. But playing it with Sneered changed it. It wasn't just one person's pain anymore. It was universal. It spoke of every loss, every unfairness, every moment when life breaks your heart. Several people in the audience were crying now. Even some of the critics who had seen thousands of performances. Then came the moment Daniel had added to the arrangement. A new section, written just for this performance. It was a conversation between the two pianists. Sneered would play a phrase asking a question. Daniel would answer. Back and forth, their hands dancing across the keys, talking to each other in a language beyond words. This was the part that represented their journey together. The teacher who had learned to be humble. The student who had taught him. The way they had changed each other. Professor Adler sat in the faculty section, her arms crossed. She had been skeptical about this performance. Sneeder's recent changes had worried her. Too much emotion, not enough discipline. But as she listened, something shifted in her chest. This was what music was supposed to be. She had forgotten. Just like Sneered had forgotten. The piece moved toward its ending. The lullaby returned, but transformed by everything that came before. Sadder, yes, but also wiser, stronger. It knew about pain now, but it also knew about healing, about finding beauty in broken things. The final notes came together. 4 hands, 1 piano, 1 sound. They held the last chord, letting it ring out into the silence. The sustain pedal kept it alive, the sound waves filling every corner of the hall, then quiet. For a moment, no one moved. The audience sat frozen, unsure if the piece was truly over or if more was coming. Then someone stood up. It was Mr. Hoffman. He started clapping, his old hands coming together with surprising force. Another person stood. Then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet. The applause was deafening. People shouted. Someone whistled. The critics, normally so reserved, clapped until their hands hurt. Daniel and Sneered stood up from the piano. They were both crying. They didn't try to hide it. Schneider turned to face the audience. He held up his hand for quiet. Slowly, the applause died down. People sat back in their seats. "Thank you," Schneider said, his voice amplified by the hall's acoustics. "But before you applaud me, there is something you need to know." He turned to Daniel. 9 months ago, this young man came to audition for the conservatory. I mocked him. I belittled him. I told him he didn't belong here. I made a cruel joke saying I would kneel if he could actually play. People in the audience shifted uncomfortably. This was not the speech they expected. He played a piece he had written for his late mother, and it was the most honest, most beautiful music I had heard in decades. It reminded me of everything I had forgotten, everything I had lost. So I did something I had never done in 42 years of teaching. Schneider paused. Then, just as he had in the audition room, he lowered himself to his knees. Right there on stage in front of 800 people. The audience gasped. I knelt before him. Schneider continued from his knees. Because he had taught me something I desperately needed to learn. That music isn't about perfection. It's about truth. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable. He looked up at Daniel. You changed my life that day. You changed how I teach, how I think about music, how I think about what matters. Daniel reached down and took Schneider's hands, helping him to his feet. But then Daniel did something unexpected. He knelt down in front of Schneider. And you changed mine, Daniel said loudly so everyone could hear. You taught me that admitting you're wrong takes more courage than being right. That the greatest thing a teacher can do is learn from their students. That it's never too late to change. The two of them stayed like that for a moment. Teacher and student, master and apprentice, but really, just two humans who had helped each other find their way. Then Daniel stood up. They faced each other and bowed. To each other. With each other. Then they turned and bowed to the audience. The applause that followed was different from before. Louder, yes, but also deeper, more meaningful. People weren't just clapping for the performance. They were clapping for the honesty. For the courage it took to admit mistakes, for the beauty of watching two people teach each other how to be better. After the concert, dozens of people wanted to talk to Daniel, offer him opportunities, recording contracts, concert tours. But Daniel politely declined most of them. I'm still learning, he told them. I have a lot more work to do. His father hugged him tight. Your mother would be so proud, he whispered. I'm sorry I didn't understand before. Lynn jumped up and down. That was amazing. Can I learn piano too? Of course, Daniel said. I'll teach you. Mr. Hoffman shook his hand. I always knew you had something special, boy. Always knew. Later, after most people had left, Daniel and Schneider sat together in the empty concert hall. What happens now? Daniel asked. Now? Schneider smiled. Now you keep learning. Keep growing. Keep being honest in your music. And maybe someday you'll teach the next generation, and hopefully you'll do it better than I did. You're doing it better now, Daniel said, because of you. Schneider stood up. Come on, let's go get some food. I know a place that makes excellent schnitzel. My treat. As they walked out of the hall together, neither of them noticed the janitor turning off the lights, but they would have appreciated the symmetry if they had. A different janitor, a different hall, but the same kind of quiet support that allows dreams to grow. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets were wet and shining under the streetlights. Vienna sparkled like new. Daniel thought about his mother. About that day in the audition room. About everything that had happened since. One moment of courage had changed everything. Not just for him, but for Schneider too. And through Schneider for all his students. Ripples spreading out in ways they couldn't even see yet. Thank you, Daniel said quietly. For what? Schneider asked. For kneeling. For being brave enough to change. Schneider smiled. Thank you for giving me a reason to. They walked together into the night, two musicians who had taught each other the most important lesson of all. That the greatest music comes not from perfect technique or flawless performance, but from the courage to be human, to be vulnerable, to be real. And somewhere in the space between the notes, Daniel's mother smiled.